start doing that, then I don't know what happened. Players never made it. Players never made this thing.
Now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll make it clear, I'll state my case, which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled and every highway, oh, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, I saw it through without exemption. I planned each chartered course, each careful step along the byway, oh, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, I bit off more than I could chew, but through it all there was doubt. I ate it up and spit it out. I faced it all and I stood tall and did it my way. Of love, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing. Now as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way, oh, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Oh, what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say a word that truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way. The record shows I took the blows and did it my way.
Good afternoon and welcome to this memorial and celebration of life for Arne Petersen. Debbie, Darlene, Madeline, and extended family members, including Arne's sister, Myron Wilson. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your tribute to your father and partner, father-in-law, grandfather, and brother. Last week, I had a graveside service for a former resident of Prince Albert who died in Calgary almost 2 years ago. Her son, a golf pro in Thailand, was not able to get home during the pandemic, and so the service was delayed until this fall. And the family made the comment that it was nice to receive everyone's emails and cards and flowers and phone calls at the time of the death. But now they were finally able to receive the hugs and physically be around people, which they felt helped bring closure. And so to all of you who are here today and those who are joining us virtually, thank you. The family needed this, and you needed this. Your presence is a gift to Arne's family and a tribute to his great legacy. I'm not going to talk much about golfing today, even though it's a big part of Elkridge. That's for another time. Today is Arne's time and his family's time. Unlike some of you, he didn't eat, sleep, and breathe playing the game. In fact, I understand he didn't really like playing golf on this course, because when he did, he saw things that should be done or changed. His mind was always in overdrive. But Arne's real passion was conceptualizing this vision and making it a reality. Hard work was part of his DNA. There was no job and no piece of equipment too challenging for him. In another context, there's a verse of scripture that says, young men have visions and old men have dreams, or dream dreams. Well, Arne was more of a visionary than a dreamer, because a dreamer is described as one whose ideas or projects are impractical, whereas a visionary is a person who has unusual foresight and imagination. Thank you, Arne, for not giving up and following through on what you were able to see in the midst of the forest. And so here we are in this place and this piece of Saskatchewan paradise. When I arrived in Prince Albert in 1986, Elkridge didn't exist. And shortly after I arrived, I met Arne. And I don't remember exactly the details. And over the years, our paths would cross occasionally, sometimes out here. I've officiated several weddings here. And in the early days, the ceremonies were usually held on the driving range. Now, I'm sure the avid golfers here didn't always appreciate that being shut down during the ceremonies. Over the years, I guess both Arne and I developed a mutual respect and appreciation for each other, maybe because we were both perfectionists, I'm not sure. And so the family has asked me to officiate today's ceremony, and for that I am honored and privileged. Thank you. We just came through the Thanksgiving weekend, and the holidays, including Thanksgiving, are always difficult to deal with when there's a family member or members missing around the table. The first Thanksgiving celebration, too, took place less than 1 year after most of the pilgrims had died from illness and starvation. Now, the community knew that the rest would perish the following winter if there was not a good harvest. They could have given up, but they willed themselves to survive. They could have focused only on what they had lost, but they took a day to stop and focus on what they had gained. Although our lives are not as dramatic as those of the pilgrims, we too have received blessings even during our loss. And today we press the pause button in our busy world and busy lives to hold a memorial and celebration for an unprecedented person and to give thanks for the life of Arne Petersen, a life well lived and one who shared generously with so many. I'm going to ask Curtis at this time to come up and share the eulogy with us.
As I drove onto the property today, I'm reminded by the vision I was greeted to on a number of occasions. The same vision many of you have seen before. The beautiful S-shaped road that meanders through the forest and brings us onto the property. The design of the road slows one down from the hustle of driving to the lake after rushing out of the city, which was no different than today for most of us. More often than not, there was a large grader driving on the road with a silver-haired man behind the wheel with, of course, a big smile and a quick wave as you drove by if he didn't see you, or he's very focused on the road itself. There was the odd time that I'd have a meeting with Arne and I had to slow down and remind him about the meeting, and he would turn around and get back to the office as soon as possible. Debbie would say you could see him sometimes at dusk driving the tractor, or the greater, teeth and hair glowing in the dusk in the last lights of the day. Unlike the residents of Elkridge, I think he had a mixed blessing when that road was finally paved. On behalf of his daughters, Darlene and Debbie, and their families, and Arne's partner, Madeline, and her family, we want to thank you for attending this memorial service for Arne. My name is Curtis Bell, and I was a friend of Arne's and a business associate over the last 27 years. And it is my honor to speak today about Arne. I am 100% sure we need a lot more time than we have here today to do the man the full honor he deserves and to capture his true spirit. When you met Arne, he always had a warm smile, firm handshake. He looked you in the eye, and he took an interest in you in that moment in time. Even though he had a lot going on, he wasn't distracted. He was focused on you. Arne's shack, as we called it, was the place that I'd get to see him most often. And if you had an opportunity to go visit him there, you got to look at some drawings, usually with a plan of what was going on and what might be happening next. He always had something cooking and a dream of what was going to take place in the near future. He was a visionary and a builder and always had ideas of how to make things better. I'm not sure how you distill a life like Arne's in 10 minutes or so to capture the essence of a man like him, but we will all do our best. For those of you who knew him more closely, you knew how genuine and caring a person he was. Arne was really the definition of a true gentleman. Arne's start in life was one that I could not imagine. He was one of 14 children born to immigrants who had settled into the Wadena area. He left home at 15 to work, eventually ending up in the oil fields and then road construction. This was the start of a lifelong love of operating large machinery, and most of us would say it was the start of an addiction. Arne eventually found his way into the forestry business of McMillan Bloedel and then Weyerhaeuser, and eventually started his own company in 1975, the Precision Group of companies as it became known. He did this with no formal education in engineering or management, but a world of experience. This is where the aptitude for figuring things out and his mechanical genius, as well as his vision to grow without any limits, fully showed itself and ultimately drove his and the business's success. And I, like many others, really like to call it, Arne got shit done when others said it couldn't happen. Debbie and Darlene recall the story of Arne and 4 or 5 formally educated engineers sitting around looking at drawings, and they were telling him why something wasn't going to work. And I think that happened a lot, actually. After thinking about it for a bit, he proceeded to suggest a way it could work, and after some head scratching, they all looked around at each other and agreed the drawings could be changed and the process could be made to work. Precision and eventually employed over 600 people in offices in Canada and the US, which is a remarkable achievement. And ultimately, it grew to be a worldwide leader in design and fabrication of oriented strand board plants around the world. His company at the time had a hand in developing 74 of the 75 active plants. This is a remarkable achievement for a man who left home at 15 years old. In the mid-1990s, with the advice and I think not so gentle nudge of his CFO, Jim Crawford, he sold the business. And at this point, the Elkridge experience really started to come together. As with many things Arne accomplished in life, it started small, but the dreams snowballed in what you see today as a result of his dreams. It is hard to describe the energy, charisma, and focus Arne imparted on you when you met with him. He seemed like a character out of a movie when I first met him. A big smile, perfectly styled hair, firm handshake, a gentle, low, deep voice, and a generous but easy and distinctive laugh. And of course, that great smile that you never forgot. Arne was full of life, positive energy, joy, and a true giver of his time. You always felt better after talking to him. There's people you meet in life that are energy givers, and that was Arne Petersen. As Blaine Fanyu, his longtime head of golf course operations and the superintendent, said, he made you feel good, and he trusted you to get it done, and he never doubted your ability. One of his former CEOs at Elkridge said you worked with him, not for him, and I thought that was a unique perspective. His work ethic was legendary, and many can relate to quitting time rolling around thinking they were almost done, unless, of course, Arne was out in the field with you. And if that was the case, it was usually 4 or 5 hours later, and the sun was starting to set and still going till it was pitch black, and finally him stopping. And then the next morning, he was the first one back. Darlene and Debbie felt when we were talking that he loved Saskatchewan, and as much as it was the people and really the environment, he really probably liked the extended daylight during the day so he could work longer. He was a genuine person, and he cared deeply for those around him, and he made them feel engaged. He really trusted people, and sometimes that was to a fault. He would do business on a handshake, and in fact, he started a $12 million manufacturing job at Precision on that handshake, and he was half done before the contract was signed. And needless to say, I think his lawyers, advisors, and accountants had gray hair just like Arne did. He was easy to get along with, honest, and had a great integrity and a non-existent ego. Arne was an unusual man in that regard. However, he could not stand excuses and didn't understand those who wouldn't work hard to get things done. He was not concerned or driven by material things and lived a humble, unpretentious life for such a successful man. Stuff didn't matter to him as much as people and doing things. He was not concerned or driven by material things. He was either dressed to the nines, classy and well put together, or caked in dirt and mud. And in both cases, there was a giant smile on his face. He made everyone feel welcome. He made time for everyone who wanted to speak to him, which of course meant that he was late very often and did not want to rush anyone or push them out of the way or make them feel small. He was the strangest type A personality I have ever met, and I'm not even sure you'd call him a type A personality other than what he accomplished. He wasn't boastful. He never implied he knew more than you, but just a quiet confidence and a way to show you how to get what he wanted done, and that was whether you liked it or not. On the personal side, he loved trips to Mexico with Madeline and family and friends, and he loved to fish for marlin and swordfish. And if he had a hobby, he loved that, and that was it. It wasn't golf, which is unusual given we're at a golf resort. The last 20 years of his life, he had a great partner and friend in Madeline, and that was a great addition to his daughters, Debbie and Darlene, and their families. And he always wanted the best for his whole family. There was always lots of love and laughter and fun at family get-togethers. He loved to entertain at the cabin, have people over for his special barbecue rib recipe that he kept secret from everyone. Time with family was important to Arne, and he spent it whenever he could, whether at the cabin, having the whole family down to Mexico, or time in Mesa, Arizona. He worked lots, but he knew those moments were important as well. Arne was an enigma of an owner and mostly liked getting dirty in the field versus being in the office. I can attest to that from a number of meetings where I'd be waiting half an hour for him to come back in his overalls and us to have a meeting. And that was, I was told, whether it was with Precision Service or with Elkridge. Blaine will have a few good stories on the things out at Elkridge. Arne never wanted to retire, and he never did until he was unable to work. He did not want to slow down, and his dream of slowing down was speeding up to build something that would benefit the people of Saskatchewan and carve a first-class resort out of the northern Saskatchewan wilderness. And I promise you, there is not anyone else who could have accomplished what he did. When a choice between golf and relaxation and retiring to slow down, or getting on a grader and moving earth and trees, the choice was clear. It is ironic a man who didn't really like building the golf course ended up building one. Arne always had numerous balls in the air, and one day, Butch Conley receives a call Friday night after dinner asking why the D9 Cat bulldozer was running out by the gravel pit. Remember, this is after dinner. Arne had been working earlier in the day when was, of course, called back to the office for one of his meetings, or somebody probably had to drive out there and get him. During the day, and thinking he'd be back right away, he left it running, and this was not an uncommon event. He had a mischievous part about him and loved to prove people wrong. When commented on during the construction of the pavilion that's just out by the golf course, that it was too bad it would not be ready for a big tournament coming up in about 3 days' time, he said it would be done. Butch Conley looked at him and said, "You're crazy. I'll bet you $100 it won't happen." 3 days later, extra labor, overtime costs, and Arne directly supervising, and Butch had to cough up the 100. He never complained about the hours he put in or the work he was doing. He only thought it was needed to be done and something that meant him doing it. Arne had many awards and accomplishments, and he's been honored by many, including the Order of Saskatchewan. He's a member of the Saskatchewan Tourism Hall of Fame, the Saskatchewan Golf Hall of Fame, Ducks Unlimited, the Audubon, to name a few. The world is a much better place for having Arne Petersen in it, and perhaps his biggest accomplishments go unnoticed by any but a few. He helped a number of successful businessmen get their start in life, becoming silent partners with them, giving them their first jobs, lending money when needed. My wife Shanna recalls Arne calling her at Weyerhaeuser, looking for a manager's name to call to get someone a much-needed job at a time when that was the gold-plated job in Prince Albert and very difficult to get. He gave money to those that needed it or were down on their luck, never asked for it back. He kept on employees working that many others would have given up on a number of times to keep them moving forward with the challenges they were facing in their life. He helped save a lot of people, and never once did he seek public notice or gratitude. He had a quiet pride, no need for recognition or being honored for his virtue. Arne could not wait to get home from Arizona after the winter to get back to work, sort of the opposite of those that go down there. Many good times were had in Mesa. Every Tuesday in Mesa, the friends, and really the friends from PA, who really are the PA Mafia, would get together and have a buffet with the boys every Tuesday. They always played a game to see who bought, and no matter who lost, he would find a reason to go back in and leave an extra 20 under the plate for the waiter or waitress to help them out. Now that story was from Butch, and given that it was from Butch, I wonder it's because he felt how cheap his friends were and they weren't very good tippers. Arne was 85 years old when he passed away peacefully at Emma Lake. His last years with his partner Madeline were peaceful, but required a lot of work. She took such great care of him along with her son Derek. Caring with someone with dementia and related health issues for a long period of time is very difficult and requires a deal of patience and work, a great deal of patience and work. Arne was very grateful for Madeline's love and companionship and all the efforts on his behalf from her and Derek to make sure his last days were comfortable and him being able to stay at home. Greg Waters, the former CEO of Elkridge, sent a note to me after a call we had. His reflection on Arne, he said, Arne was a man with so much and yet required so little. To know that his family and his employees were happy and well taken care of, that the family and friends knew that he had their backs. And on any given day, if he felt like getting on a piece of machinery, he'd do that too. A housekeeper once asked, who is that man down on his hands and knees working by the housekeeping hut? It of course was Arne, building a paving stone patio for staff to enjoy meals and breaks outside without having to stand in the gravel. Greg goes on to say, I feel so privileged to have known him and worked alongside of him. I think all of us feel the same way and feel how lucky we were to have Arne in our lives.
I know your life on earth was trouble, and only you would know the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the rain. Go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven shouting, love for the Father and the Son. Oh, how we cried the day you left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. Wish I could see the angels' faces when they hear your sweet voice sing. So go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven shouting, love for the Father and the Son. and the sun.
Thank you, Curtis. Please take a moment with me to bow our heads in a word of prayer. Creator of all life, in whom we live and move and have our very being, help us to come to terms with the reality that death is a part of the cycle of life, not always fair or happening when we think it should. Help us to trust in your goodness and unconditional grace for each one of us. Even though Arne's life and health had changed for him and his family in the last few years, yet today we acknowledge and feel the finality of letting go with someone we have known and cared about. But we also express appreciation and thanks that many people for many years were privileged to experience life with him in different times and in different places, even before Elkridge came to be. And so now we entrust him to you in death, as you entrusted him to us in life, and wrap your arms of compassion around his family and give them the strength to come to terms with what has been and to anticipate what lies ahead. As we gather in the shadow of mourning, may we also see the light and perfect peace of your presence revealed to us through Jesus, in whose name we pray. Amen. When I meet with families, and as I met with Arne's family last week, I've done lots of funerals, and I always encourage people, think outside the box. There's other hymns beside How Great Thou Art and Amazing Grace. They're nice. But when you've been doing this for 40-some years, you think there's more hymns than that. And same thing with readings. And so I always say, think of the person, try to reflect the person they were, who Arne was, and what you need as a family. It's primarily for you today, even more so than it is for Arne. And so the text I'm going to share with you today is not your usual text that you might hear at a funeral. It's a text from Matthew's Gospel called the Parable of the Talents. And a parable says it's not just a story that you hear, but there's more beyond the story, something deeper, that hopefully as I explain it in my homily will become clearer to you, hopefully. So this is the text from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has, will be taken from him. That's the text that you don't often hear at a funeral. And now I'm going to venture to explain it. For some of us, Arne Petersen seemed invincible. The thought of him not being around physically might still not seem real for some of you. CBC radio host Peter Zosky, at the conclusion of his comments on the death of his colleague and journalist Barbara Fromm, said, "And so we return now to a real but diminished world." And that is what death is really about. It creates a diminished world for those left behind. The one sure thing about life is that it is unpredictable. The last 2.5 years have certainly confirmed that for all of us. Our best laid plans can be shattered and scattered by the changing tides of tomorrow. It can become very easy for us to become pessimistic and cynical because of life's changes and the uncertainty of what might happen. For Arne, and for you, the family, the tides have been changing for a while, as this difficult disease changed a big part of the person that you knew, but not the person that he'll always be in your lives, and the lives of the countless people he engaged with through his diverse and remarkable life. That is what I want to focus on today. Obviously, as was previously mentioned, when we think of Elkridge, we think of Arne Petersen. However, the last 30 plus years of his life was a result of the person behind what we saw in his accomplishments here today. It all started, as Curtis said, with the challenging work that was cultivated in his youth. It has been said that without hard work, nothing grows but weeds. Well, there weren't many weeds growing in Arne's life. At the age of 15, we heard he left the farm. And I understand one of the first jobs was working for a neighboring farmer. Of course, there were no huge tractors that burned up thousands of dollars of fuel each day then, but rather a team of horses. According to his family, at the end of the day, when Arne was putting away the horses, they bolted and ran off, resulting in him being fired from his job. That experience in itself, which could have been devastating for some young boys, might have been the catalyst for him, determined to see beyond the problem and make it into an opportunity for something better. And I suspect that, too, might have been the beginning for his passion with working with heavy equipment and machines that he had control over when they started and when they stopped. In a life that matters, the author says, "Ready or not, someday it will all end. There will be no more sunrises, no minutes, hours, or days. All the things we accumulated, whether treasured or forgotten, will pass to someone else. It will not matter what you owned, or what you were owed. The wins and losses that once seemed so important will fade away. It will not matter where you came from or on what side of the tracks you lived. So what will matter? What will matter is not what you got, but what you gave. What will matter is not your success, but your significance. What will matter is not how many people you knew, but how many will feel a lasting loss when you are gone. Living a life that matters does not come by accident. It's a matter of choice. And Arne lived a life that mattered by choice." Now back to the reading that I just read from Matthew. Often referred to as the parable of the talents. A talent in ancient Israel was a unit of exchange, a monetary value, not our modern sense of talent being a skill that you have. And one talent back then was equivalent to 20 years of wages for an average person. So 5 talents would be like 100 years of wages, a huge amount of money, almost beyond comprehension for us. Again, in those times, masters with servants were the norm. Obviously, though, the master or employer trusted his workers to the extent that he gave them his wealth while he was away for an extended period of time. Of course, 2 of them invested what they got and doubled their investment. Obviously, it was not today's TSX. But the one who got the least amount of money from the owner didn't do anything with it. He buried it in the ground because he was afraid of losing it. And of course, when the owner returned, this guy gave back the same amount he had initially received, while the other 2, who had risked it all, had much more to offer back to the owner. Now, of course, in this context, the owner or master is Jesus or God. The reality for all of us here today is that we don't all have the same gifts or abilities or resources. And we can spend a lifetime lamenting that fact and who might be to blame for it. Or we can take the little that we might have in comparison to somebody else and do something with it and make a difference, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. And I suspect we have all had what we would call the time in our lives where it was an opportunity of a lifetime. Perhaps it was an investment opportunity, a job opportunity, an opportunity to go somewhere, meet someone, do something that you felt would never come your way again. I believe we all have a literal opportunity of a lifetime. It is life itself. Every day is an opportunity of a lifetime. We are given opportunities to make a difference in the lives of others. And from God's perspective, life is an equal opportunity employer. Now back to Arne Petersen. Like many of us, he was given many gifts and skills. And along with his extremely hard work ethic and strong-willed determination to do it his way, along with some great qualified people at his side, his investments eventually paid large dividends, and not just financially, because as I mentioned earlier when I quoted the author of the reading Living a Life That Matters, at the end of the day, it's not what you got, but what you gave that really matters. And that is what stands out for me about Arne. He sold his successful business. And unlike many people who retire from a job or successful career and build themselves a huge house or cabin with all the toys, with a sense of entitlement for many years of hard work and saving, Arne Petersen took a different approach. In fact, it was during that transition time in his life that he rolled up his sleeves, got on the bulldozer and grader and whatever else he got his hands on, and did something with his many talents that he invested over the years. And his home in Emma Lake, like his life, was modest, unlike what some people might have expected who did not really know the man behind Elkridge. Arne may have not been a practicing church member, but he lived by many of the Christian principles that Jesus taught, including today's text about the parable of the talents. Arne knew what to do with his success. He invested it back into the natural surroundings and enhanced its beauty to the point where we have all become the beneficiaries of his generosity and incredible imagination for what became reality. And the real point of the story in the parable is not about what gifts we are given or how much we have. It is about what we do with what we have. And that is why both the one with the 5 talents and the 2 talents receive the same reward at the end. For God's value system is much different than ours. It has nothing to do with how much we deserve or think we deserve. If it did, I think most of us wouldn't have very much. But instead, it is based on God's generous, unconditional grace. As a loving and caring parent, God sees beyond the children's flaws and mistakes and loves them just the same. The greatest reward in all of this is to hear the Master commend you for what you have done. It's kind of like the woman eating in a restaurant who was furious when her steak was brought to her table and it was too rare. All red in her face, she said, "Waiter, didn't you hear me say, 'well done'?" And the waiter said, "Thank you. I haven't had a compliment all day." And the compliment of compliments is to stand before God who made you, the God who gifted you, whether you are a one-person talent or a five-person talent, and hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Arne Petersen, well done, good and faithful servant. Helen Keller said, "What we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose. For all that we love deeply becomes part of us, as Arne Petersen has become part of us." Amen. This time I'm going to call upon the grandchildren, Jay, Lee, and Graham, to share some memories.
I'm Jay. Curtis, I have to correct you. When it got dark, he'd just say, "Graham, go get the 1-ton. Jay, go get the truck and get the high beams on this area." So I have a little poem here I wrote. Who can be a leader by setting examples to follow? Who can develop an idea and keep environmental balance? Who can take waste and make it useful? Who can become a champion of wild places? Who can take a dream and turn it into reality? Who am I talking about? He would say, all of you.
Thanks, Jay. It's gonna be tough to beat for sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I guess I gotta see this here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Arnie's second oldest grandchild, the son of Darlene. And I'd just like to thank each and every one of you for coming out today. I want to thank the Elkridge staff for being able to hold this today. And for the ones that are virtual, that couldn't make it, and the ones that aren't here today, we just want to say we hear you and we feel you. You know, when we think about the ways to talk about Arne, our grandfather, you know, recently the amount of memories that come through, rushing through someone's head, becomes very mind-boggling. And one of Grandpa's people that he always used to listen to on the radio, John Gormley, had something that he shared a week ago. And John was on point with this, and I'd just like to share that with everybody today. So just 1 second here, and please enjoy this.
Coming back to Saskatchewan years ago, I first met Arne Petersen, the visionary founder and promoter of Elkridge, the resort next to Waskesiu in northern Saskatchewan. As we hung out for a day, the stories flowed, leaving home as a teenager, what hard work and resilience meant, and a life in the oil patch construction, forestry, pipelines, and his labor of love called Elkridge, and how shaping a four-season and golf resort inside the boreal forest was impossible. At least that's what the naysayers said, but Arne never did. A few hours with this man, it was the first time I thought, and have said it about a few others over the years, if Saskatchewan had 10 Arne Petersens, you wouldn't recognize this place. From resort owner-operator to the guy driving heavy equipment and pushing bush for new holes on his golf course, he was frail in recent years, and Arne has passed away. In addition to a loving family, he leaves a province much better and grateful for having had him with us. I'm John Gormley.
Well, John, I couldn't have said it any better myself. If we had 10 Arne Petersens in this province, what would it look like? That we'll never know. But what I can tell you is that people like my grandfather, Arne, is a one-in-a-kind person. One person you'll meet in your lifetime. And we are all so lucky to have had the time we had with him. So, those of you that know Arne, he's a man of many words and slogans and sayings. And I would like to share a couple of them that he believed and lived by. One was that if you put in a good day's work, there's no greater feeling. He'd also ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself. He would never ask, and if he did ask, he'd be there right beside you. Well, here's my little story for that. I was 16 years old, working up here at Elkridge on Blaine's crew, the maintenance crew for the golf course. We finished our shift about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and our summers are beautiful up here. And I'm thinking, great, I got the rest of the day to enjoy. Well, those of you know that Arne, how he is. No sooner did I think that, I hear a knock at my door at the trailer. And there he was, standing there saying, "Get changed, I need your help." Well, being 16 years old, I was like, well, I'm pretty busy, Grandpa. He just says, he all just did was chuckle and smiled and said, "I see that, now get dressed." Okay, well, I know when to not push my luck, so I got dressed and jumped in the truck with him. And I still remember to this day him saying, "Son, I would never ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself." And I knew that, and I heard him, but I didn't know 100% what that meant. We pull up to the pro shop, and as we pull up, there's a nice sidewalk that looks like it's going to be going in. There's a plate tamper and a bunch of bricks. We get out, and I go, uh-oh, I've never laid bricks before. I've never operated a tamper before. Uh-oh. Well, as you can imagine, it wasn't just me laying the bricks. It was him and I, until after supper time as the sun was going down. As we complete it, he slaps me on the shoulder as he jokes around and says, see what a good day feels like? Good day's work feels like, sorry. Well, Grandpa, what I can truthfully tell you today, that I live by those words that you say every day, and we love you and we always will. Your legacy will live and breathe through all of us. And lastly, you'll always be my hero. Thank you.
Everyone knew and everyone loved Arne. You could walk in any room, anywhere, and put a smile on your face no matter what kind of day you're having. He was that type of guy. Everyone that knew Arne knew that he was the hardest and most determined worker around. He was the first to arrive and the last to leave. He was that type of guy. Everyone knew that Arne's success was not based on a greed for things. It was about doing what was natural for him, and success just happened to follow him. Success to Arne was always being able to help people, friends, employees, charities, and family. He was that type of guy. We're all going to miss the man they call Arne. I call him Grandpa, my best friend, my mentor. He was my Paul Bunyan, larger than life. He always was from the first time I remember meeting him till the last time I seen him. You gave everything, Grandpa, and you expected nothing. But you'll always have my love and respect, just like everyone else's lives that you've touched. Because he was that type of guy. We will meet again, Grandpa. Me being that little boy, holding your hand while we walk through a field, a forest, or even down a street. To start our journey all over again. And to start reliving what we had. And I know you'll make this happen, Grandpa, because you are that type of guy. Thank you.
Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Sometimes it feels like this world's gone crazy. Grandpa, take me back to yesterday, when the line between right and wrong didn't seem so hazy. Lovers really fall in love to stay, stand beside each other come what may. Was a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say? Families really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away. Whoa, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Grandpa, everything is changing fast. We call it progress, but I just don't know. Grandpa, let's wander back into the past and paint me a picture of long ago. Did lovers really fall in love to stay, stand beside each other come what may? Was a promise really something people kept, not just something they would say then forget? And daddies really bow their heads to pray, daddies really never go away. Whoa, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. Whoa, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days.
Thank you, Jay, Lee, and Graham. We're going to have three more memories to be shared from different parts of Arne's life and his work. I'm going to invite, first of all, John Robillard.
This is a pretty hard act to follow. Anyway, I've known Arne for about 63 years. I grew up in Hudson Bay. My older brother was a real good friend of his. I was working for Sass Power, and I used to see him when I'd come home on weekends. Got to know him a little bit. When I was ready to get married in 1964, I didn't want to travel and live in a bunkhouse all my life. So I quit power and went back to work in the mill. Arne was there, I knew him. I knew a lot of the people, they were hometown people. And over the years, Arne and I became very close. I became in charge of production. He was in charge of maintenance, and we worked very closely together. Arne left the mill to go and do other things in the 70s. I stayed with the mill, moved my way up, and got transferred to Thunder Bay, Ontario, where we needed a large expansion. So I called on Arne, and he came out. We spent a few days going over everything, and we hired him and his company to do one of the first big jobs they had. And after that, I was fortunate enough to become manager of new business development for McMillan Bloedel. And during that time, we built 4 new mills. And I had Arne do the engineering and construction of all of them. So we were very close, spent a lot of time together. But I'll just tell you a few more personal stories. In 1965, I'd been married at that point, I guess about a year, a little over a year, and I bought a house trailer from Arne. It was an 8x48. He and Doreen and the girls had built a new home. And my wife and I were just renting a house. She was pregnant. And this was more than 9 months, by the way. And we were looking for a place, and we got talking at work. And so Arne said, I'll give you a real good deal, which he did, I thought. But that winter, it got down to 57 below. And an 8x48 trailer built in the 50s had 2-inch walls, no insulation, a gravity-fed furnace. So Arne wasn't my best friend for a while. But we did get through the winter. I sold the trailer quickly the next summer. And anyway, as we went on, we had a number of great experiences, but one in particular. In 1969, I had throat cancer. And I went into Saskatoon Hospital and had an operation, had a vocal cord removed, and they put in a synthetic one. And I couldn't talk for about a month. But Arne had to come into Saskatoon to pick up some supplies that were flown in for the mill, and he stopped in to see me. So I had a writing pad and a pen, and when he came into the room, you know, he'd give me a big hug, and we were sitting there, and so I write on this note, Arne, I can't talk. I won't be able to talk for a month. So I gave him the note. So he writes back, okay. I said, write back, Arne, you dummy, I can hear. I just can't talk. But that day, when he stopped in to see me, was kind of a turning point. He became my friend, not my brother's best friend. So after that, we did many trips together. One I will talk about is, I think it was in the late 80s. I was over in Germany to the, it's a worldwide construction equipment show called Ligna. And Arne and some of his people, one of them's with me today, Bob Batt, used to go to those shows every year because that's where they meet customers and talk to all the mill manufacturers. And so I went over with a couple of people from my company, and Arne was there when we got there. So he said, come on, we'll go and have a beer. And they have a huge auditorium. Like this Ligna covers about 4 square miles of property with nothing but equipment and new ideas. And anyway, we go into this auditorium, and there's probably 400 or 500 people in there. Tables set up everywhere, and people drinking. And we just walk in and we're walking across the floor, and there's this well-endowed, very large German woman carrying 3-liter steins of beer in each hand, okay? Like a liter stein full of beer. And as we walk in the door, she yells, Arne! And I said to the guy beside me, holy shit, this is Germany. Like, everybody knows Arne. So anyway, we find out that he'd been going there for a few years before this, and he'd known of these people, but Arne was well known everywhere. And as we were building the mills, we built one in Minnesota. Arne come and stayed with Pat and I until he got his crew up there, and then they got some quarters in Deerwood, and he did a lot of the building of equipment and all the instructor installation. And then we went on to build another one in East Kentucky, and there was a huge outroar from the Californian environmentalists because we were going to be cutting trees. And at that time, it was the spotted owl dilemma. And, the closest the spotted owl ever got to Kentucky was probably somewhere in Montana. But regardless, they were down there. They're going to be protesting this mill. So I was going to go to a environmental conference in Davis, California, just out of Sacramento at the university. And Arne said, well, I'd like to go with you. So the two of us went, and we sat and listened to these individuals, downplay anything that was going to hurt the environment and cutting down trees. So after 2 days of that, Arne said, let's knock off Friday. Said, I always wanted to tour Alcatraz. So I said, hey, yeah, I'm game. So we jumped in the car and we went to San Francisco. We took the tour, went across on the boat, and spent about 4 hours in Alcatraz. Had a wonderful time. We spent the weekend there. But Arne was available whenever anybody needed him. But Arne, as everyone knows, had a heart of mush. He could not offend anyone. He could not say anything bad about anybody. So he was having some problems in his mill in Macon, Georgia. And he phoned me up. I was in Minnesota at the time. We built a mill there. He said, John, could you come down to Macon? He said, I need some help here. And I said, well, what is it? He said, well, I need you to talk to my employees. So we chatted a bit of what it was about, and I went down with him, and he had a few employees that he wanted to get rid of, but he didn't know how to do it, or he maybe knew how, he just didn't want to. And I was sucker enough to go along with him. So I went and spent a couple of days with him, and I talked to the people, and we talked about different types of organizations. And Arne had wanted me to, see if they wouldn't be a little more receptive to a participative management, and because they were all unionized. But anyway, we got that. A couple of years later, I was back in Hudson Bay. I was now president of the forest products company there. And Arne phones me up again from Vancouver, and he said, John, can you come to Vancouver? I said, well, yeah, what do you need, Arne? He said, well, I really have to talk to you. I've got some real serious stuff going on. So head office was in Vancouver, so I faked a trip and went in there. I get in there, and Arne tells me that he has made a deal to sell PS&E to the Finlanders, but he can't tell his employees. He doesn't know how. He wouldn't do it. So, me being the old sucker again, we called the meeting for the Monday morning, and we had all the staff there. And I sugarcoated it a bit, but I broke the news to him. But Arne was the type of guy that would do anything for anybody, but he couldn't do anything bad for anybody or anything bad to anybody. He was the greatest guy and the greatest friend. Now, there were some comments made earlier about whether he was a dreamer or a visionary. and I guess I disagree a bit because Arne was a dreamer. But Arne was a guy that no matter what the dream was, he could do it or find a way to do it, not just a visionary to find someone else to do it. Arne was a guy that did it himself, and I applaud him. Arne was a lover of every lady there is. No, Arne loved ladies, and I mean anybody he knew, my wife, Bob's wife, he loved them, and he was such a gentleman. But he loved nobody more than Darlie and Debbie. They were his shining star. Anyway, thank you.
We all loved him too.
I know. Anyway, and anyway, those are my little stories of Arne, and I applaud you that have gone through his lifetime, his work and all of that. It's been a wonderful day. Thanks for coming. I now live in Duncan, British Columbia. I retired in '99. I've stayed in touch and been to Elkridge many times after that. But anyway, thanks for having me, and God bless you all. I love you, Arne.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. This time I'll call upon Blaine. Blaine.
Hello, everyone. My name's Blaine Fannew, and I've worked for Arne for a number of years here at Elkridge. A number of years. It's a privilege to stand here today and share some great stories about a great man. I kind of named these stories, so this first one's called First Meeting. I first met Arne in the summer of 1994 here at Elkridge. One day I came back to the yard, and all the construction workers were all revved up, saying, "We have to get all this equipment lined up in a straight row." I said, "What's the fuss about?" "Arne is coming tomorrow." I said, "Well, who's this Arne guy and what's his deal?" "He's Bill's partner, the one with the money. He's coming from Vancouver and he likes to have things neat and tidy." So we parked all the equipment we had at the time in a row, straight row. And I remember it took us some time because some machines we had to boost to move. Right? Yeah, no. Moments later, Bill Locke shows up with his van. He opens his van and pulls out all these plastic swans. He pulls out about 10 or 12 of these plastic swans, and they're about so big and so high. They have a hollow back, they're kind of like a hole in the back, and they're actually planters. He says, "Blaine, you and the guys, take that rowboat over there and take these out to number 2 and put these swans in the pond. Arne will like that." So we took the rowboat out to number 2 and put the swans in the water. And I do remember it took some time to accomplish this. They weren't very stable. We got back to the yard and Bill says, "Arne will want to go for a tour tomorrow, and Blaine, you can take him." I said, "Sure, I'll take him." Next day, Bill brings Arne down to the yard and we meet. I remember he was all dressed really well with a buttoned-up shirt, blue pants, and loafers. He had no work boots on. His hair was perfect, he was soft-spoken, and seemed pleasant and kind. And I noticed he liked to laugh. I remember I immediately felt good around him. After a quick intro, we started on our tour. When we got to number 2, he said, "What the hell is in the water?" I said, "They're swans." Bill thought they would impress you. They were all collapsed and tangled together. Some just had their heads sticking out like periscopes, so they're like, periscopes. Where was? Yeah. Arne said, "It looks like they were ambushed last night." I laughed all the way down. He laughed all the way down number 2. He laughed so hard that he started snorting. I thought to myself, this is a guy I can be around. That's when I asked him if he was an engineer because he had this PS&E company. He said, "No, I tell engineers what to do," with a laugh. When the tour was over, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he did this often, and with a soft touch, he said, "Blaine, you guys just do what you think is right. You don't have to ask, just do it. I remember thinking I couldn't believe this man who I just met would trust a young kid like myself. That was one quality Arne had, was that he trusted people to do the right thing. He always trusted his employees. Okay, this one I call the bunkers. The morning I heard of Arne's passing, I was on number 1 Birch. I was driving down the fairway and I got to the green and I saw the bunkers and I immediately thought of Arne. We were installing those bunkers late one October and all we had left was to install the drainage. There was 3 of us out there, Jeff Waskesiu, Arne, and myself, and it was getting close to quitting time. You guys probably know the theme already. Arne was on a skid steer and was showing no sign of stopping. He was focused. I told Jeff we can't leave Arne out here by himself, and he can't outwork us. We are much younger than he is. Jeff said, "How long do you think he'll work?" I figured out another half hour because it's going to be dark. Well, we're out there for another 3 hours, well into the dark and working under the lights of the machines. We got the whole thing done that night. Arne was very goal-driven. Okay, this one's called the chimney. I then drove to number 2 Birch Fairway and another memory came to mind. We were getting the ferry ready for seed and our Harley rake broke down. And it's a machine that goes on the back of a 3-point hitch and it leaves a nice smooth seed bed. So it broke down. So we decided that we'd had to rake the fairway by hand to finish. It was in the evening and we were raking when a half-ton pulls up at the end of the fairway and Arne comes out carrying a rake to help us finish. As we raked, we talked about family, life, and how he got his business started. He told us he bid on this job, and I can't really remember what it was, but I do remember it had something to do with the chimney, either cleaning it or taking it down. I think it may have been at the mill, maybe in Hudson Bay. John, I'm not sure. He said he bid on a price and got the contract. He said the job ended up being easier than he anticipated and required less time than he thought to accomplish, and he didn't feel right taking the agreed upon price. So he gave them a new, much lower price, so it felt fair with him. He said because he did that, it helped him tremendously with future contracts in the industry. He said that made all the difference. Arne was honest and had lots of integrity. Okay, this one's called Where's Arne? Right. One day we were working on the water lines down at the pump house, and of course Arne was helping us. We were in a trench with rubber boots and a lot of mud, and the trench would have been about so deep, so we're almost waist deep. A salesman shows up who we dealt with golf course equipment. Before I could say anything, he says, "Blaine, where is Arne? I'd really like to meet with him." And I said, "Well, Arne's right here. He's right beside me." He looks at Arne and says, "Yeah, right." I laughed and said, "This is Arne, this is Arne." And he says, "You're kidding." And then Arne looks up and says, "Sorry to disappoint you, bud." Arne always had a great sense of humor. I couldn't remember which salesman that was, so I called a friend who I thought it was to verify the story. He said, "That wasn't me, that was Laurie from Oak Creek. I was the guy who flagged down an old guy driving a cat and asked him where Arne was." So it happened more than once, and who knows how many times Arne was asked, "Where's Arne?" I know I was asked hundreds of times, "Where's Arne? Where's Arne?" Arne had a very hands-on approach and always quick to help when needed. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do. This is called the irrigation pipe. One year we were making number 2 Tamarac's tee bigger. And it was in October on a Friday, and I was heading home for the weekend. So I left Arne on the tee box working by himself. Before I left, I pointed out that there's a 4-inch water line where he was working, and to watch for it. I said, "Okay, Arne, there's a pipe right here, so watch it." I came back on Monday and I drove straight out to number 2 because Arne had a history with pipes and power lines. Actually, we used to joke that when the power went out here, Arne's on site. He's digging somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, so when I got there, the 4-inch pipe I went straight out there, and the 4-inch pipe was sticking out of the ground on a 45-degree angle. I went back to the shop, not mad, but I wasn't surprised at all. Arne showed up and came walking across the yard and said, "I found your pipe." I said, yes, I saw that. He said, "Sorry about that, but it's nothing we can't fix, and I sure did give her a clean cut." He was always so positive and optimistic. Did I tell you I had a full head of hair when I started here? I had a nice long... It's been said, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing enough. This one I called Rome, like the city Rome. Arne was always well organized. He'd have his day planned out in this little coiled notebook. Plan A, Plan B, and it was a little coiled notebook about so big and it flipped like this. I think he had the whole resort planned in that book. Yeah. The day would start off with him having all the equipment running, and sometimes it would run all day, and sometimes we'd have to shut it off at the end of the day. Then he would jump from machine to machine. It was really amazing to watch. He would get off one machine and walk briskly to the next machine. Often he'd give you a little hop and a skip and a smile, so he'd give you one of those. Right? Did I nail it? Where was I now? Yeah. Then you knew things were going great. The equipment energized him, and this wasn't new, shiny equipment by any means. I was always amazed at what he could pull off with the equipment we've had. Lucky we had Danny to fix it. One day, Plan A wasn't going as planned, and neither was Plan B. Equipment problems and bad weather. There was no skipping that day. He was getting frustrated. I said to him, "Maybe we should cool our jets, Arne, and regroup for tomorrow. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day." He looked at me and said, "That's because I wasn't there." Fair enough. So, I received numerous texts the past few days from friends and past employees. I'd like to read a few of them. What a lifetime of memories. For us, it's the sleigh rides at New Year's and that fur coat he wore. He definitely made a lasting impression. A life well lived. Can't ask for more than that. He was a larger-than-life father to you young guys and a remarkable friend to me. That's the ending to the most legendary journey of a man. I like how we could dress him up for Canada Day Parade. He was a trailblazer. He was a good man, great character, and a builder like no other. In closing, Arne was a very special mentor to me. I'm very grateful for being a part of his dream. A man who left us a special place where people work, live, and play. For me, he gave me my career and a life at the lake with my wife and kids. He'll be missed but never forgot. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaine. And now we'll have Sharon.
Well, what he said there are hard act to follow. Hi, everyone. I'm Sharon Miller, and I'm Madeline's sister. Deeply honored to be asked to speak a few words about Arne Petersen from our family. And not Arne Petersen, the businessman. We know him as Arne Petersen, the friend. Just recently, in the last couple of days, I've had the opportunity to speak to some people who said they started with Arne Petersen, Macmillan Bloedel in Hudson Bay, and then on to Precision Instruments. And they remembered him as being a great colleague and a great boss. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful legacy to leave 60 years later, and people are still calling you a great guy. Arne kind of just slid into our family. He got an extended family of children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, in-laws, outlaws, and nieces and nephews, and he seemed to love them all. Now, to us, he was a gentleman and a charmer. Now, part of that goes back to the comment about women, because when you met Arne, if you were a woman, he was a hugger and a kisser. Okay? And he always had a gracious opening line, such as, "Good to see you, it's been so long," or, "Hi, sweetheart, you're looking beautiful today." True to being Arne, when he woke up the day before he passed, when he saw Madeline, he said, "There's my sweetheart." And then in a true, clear voice, he said, "I'm Arne Petersen." We thought that was wonderful. Now, I know you've heard the story from Blaine over here regarding the building of Elkridge. Arne told it to me in a much simpler fashion, so take no offense, Blaine. Okay. I asked him about Elkridge, and he said, "Well, I got this guy, Blaine. He builds golf courses." We walked over all of that heavily treed property, and when we were done, I said, "Well, can we build a golf course here?" Blaine said, "Yes, it will take a lot of time and a lot of money." To which Arne replied, "I've got a lot of time and I've got a lot of money. Let's do it." And now, here we are in this wonderful, wonderful place. And the 4th rated golf course in all of Saskatchewan, I believe, as of Google the other day. Arne also loved Emma Lake, though. That was where his home was. He loved the beautiful view. And he especially loved his pontoon boat. It was like a floating entertainment center, and Arne liked to entertain. He loved to go for a lake cruise, have some snacks, a few drinks, happy hour, just with family, friends, and neighbors. If it was chilly, he moved everybody up onto the deck because he had the barbecue there, and it had its own little house, the barbecue. And if need be, you even had to go to the garage if it got a little bit too cold. But either way, you were probably going to be treated to some of Arne's special ribs. Now, to the person, I think it was Curtis, said we know where he got the rib recipe. Yeah, it came all the way from Mesa. He brought those spices with him all the way from Mesa. And speaking of ribs, we have a family gathering every year, every summer, called the Rib Off. And that's based on the fact that everyone claimed their ribs were better than everybody else's. A huge prize was at the end. Dinner and a movie. Well, he won, pleased to have won. Little did he know dinner and a movie was a can of Spam and a DVD. He did voluntarily admit the bit about the spices, though, but he didn't care. He just loved being there, seeing, meeting everybody, getting to visit with everybody, because he loved people. He also liked fishing. I heard that mentioned. But it didn't matter where, whether it was out on Emma Lake, whether it was up to a fly-in fishing camp with his friends, or down to the Bisbee, I think it's called, for deep-sea fishing at Cabo. Because the reason he liked fishing was that he had sun, fun, friends, relaxation, and no telephones. Besides fishing, and these guys have already mentioned it far better than I, he loved to be on machinery and equipment, pushing dirt around. And the older he got, the smaller the machinery got, but he still loved it just as much, pushing around some dirt and some gravel. He loved Mesa. For many years, his family members gathered together for good times, and many new friends got made until COVID came. And we are certainly hoping that the family will get together again now in Mesa, now that hopefully COVID is past us. Arne was a good friend, and he was a long-time friend. I'm going to specifically mention George Taylor. He and Arne have been friends for, we think, 45 years. Through good times and bad times. They kept in contact. They went to the Grey Cup together several times, spent lots of time in George's man cave in Prince Albert, and got together even when they were in Mesa for 45 years. I also remember being at Elkridge when he introduced us to his friend Russell, who's probably here today. He had known Arne for many years. He called himself the handyman or the Mr. Fix-It. Arne said, we couldn't have built Elkridge without him because he knows where the stuff is, what was done and where the stuff is. So they may want to keep him on hand. I also want to mention as a friend, Derek. That's Madeline's son. He called him Dingbat, but we assumed that to be in a good way. Okay? They tooted around Elkridge, puttered together at the cabin, even went to town shopping, but they became good friends who just enjoyed each other's company, just being together. Derek turned out to be one of Arnie's caregivers, and in every sense of the word. He was there any time of day or night, doing whatever was needed. Thanks to Derek. Arnie was modest. I know what I know about him, not because he bragged about it or dominated the conversations, but because he was interested in people and took the opportunity to learn about others and share of himself. But there are a few things that we hope we've mentioned here that you didn't know about Arnie. I mean, we all know he was larger than life, and he dealt on the international scene. But when he was home, he really liked the simple life. He loved eagles. And I heard Debbie say today they saw eagles yesterday, and so did Madeline at the lake. Maybe that's a symbol. He loved watching them, learning about them, and he even collected memorabilia. His toothbrush holder was an eagle. He had a sweet tooth. He had dessert every single day. He loved Madeline's boiled raisin cake and ice cream and more ice cream. As time passed, he thrived on revels, which was great because it was a little thing that he could still enjoy every single day. Arnie was a major supporter. I heard someone mention how he supported people in projects. He also was a major supporter of the Salvation Army. It was his charity of choice to which he donated 4 times a year to help with the plight of others. Many people realized he was a visionary, an ideas man. It's been tossed around in several different forms. And pleased to know that when he had the ideas for projects, he often passed them off to someone else and then helped them finish that idea, supported the idea, supported the people till it got to its fruition. Madeline would like to acknowledge Dr. Sirkin and the Prince Albert Home Care Services for all the support they provided to Arnie and her, for all the information and all of the contacts that they gave to help. She would also like to thank the whole village of family, friends, and neighbors who have been there supporting Arnie and her all along the way. Arnie chose to stay at home throughout the final days. So they put him a hospital bed in front of the living room window where he could watch the boats, the birds, the squirrels, the kids playing in the sand. It was kind of like his own live television. He just loved those simple things. One of the texts that Madeline received after Arnie's passing said, "To Madeline, you were his angel for many years, and now he is yours." That so summed up the relationship they had. To the room note here today, there are so many friends, colleagues, family, too many to mention by name. You are not forgotten. Just letting you know you have been appreciated and glad that you were part of Arnie's life. Thanks to his family for sharing Arnie with us. And thank you, Arnie, for making our lives better.
Thank you, Sharon. It's hard to imagine that one person could have so much influence and impact on so many lives for so many years, and will for many, many years ahead. Well, we're almost getting to the end. I'm going to end with a prayer, and then the commendation and a blessing. After we're finished here today, the family invites you upstairs to the restaurant, to the dining area. That's where there'll be reception time. And the stories can continue, and the memories can also be shared there too over a reception time. I invite you to stand if you're so able to for the prayers. And after my prayer, we'll have the Lord's Prayer. And if that's your tradition, please join with me in the Lord's Prayer. We thank you especially today for Arne and all that he shared and accomplished throughout his life. We thank you for his work ethic and the pride he had in what he did, and the people with whom he had made a lasting impact and with whom he enjoyed life. We thank you for those things that made the time spent with him memorable. We thank you for the strength and perseverance he demonstrated throughout the years, and for the people who walked alongside him even through his illness. We pray that you would give us all a vision of your purpose in our life, that we might bear witness to the hope we have in you, in life, in death, and in life beyond death. So support us through this fragile life, until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes and the busy world is hushed, and the fever of life is over, and our work is done. And then in your mercy, grant us a safe place, a holy rest, and peace at the last. And help us pray the words that we pray when other words sometimes fail us, the words you taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Please be seated. Into your arms of mercy, O God. Arne, go peacefully in that place prepared just for you. Go gently to God's eternal presence, and go confidently to the gathering of people that surround us all. And may they hold you precious and safe until we meet again. Amen. The urn was made many years ago for Arne by a friend, and I like the bobcat that's on top of the urn lid. For those of you that can't see, it's a nice bobcat on top, very fitting. I'm going to share with you a closing benediction. It's a Scandinavian benediction that I picked up in Norway many years ago. As you go on your way, may God go with you. May God go before you to show you the way, behind you to encourage you, beside you to befriend you, above you to watch over you, and within you to give you peace. Amen. Oh, we've got a visitor. Oh, we got a visitor. Come on in, sir. Come on in. Come on in.
Sorry, I'm late.
No, you're not late. You're right on time.
Bonjour, je suis Arne's autre grandson. From Quebec, Jay. Mon bateau, how you say canoe? Oui. He is stuck dans la petite rivière rouge. I rode in Wapiti the rest of the way up here. Mon grand-père, he likes the French women, but he only liked my mother for one night. Mon grand-père, he was a big man in many ways. I was just un petit garçon on the shores of the mighty St. Lawrence. I would swim all day until the sun would go down. My lips, they turned blue. Mon grand-père would be chopping wood with his big dual axe to make a fire to keep us warm. I remember thinking, he was like Thor. You know Thor, the one with the hammer? He was like, pack, boom, tablet. Désolé, father. May, he could really swing that axe. The thing I learned about him is if he was swinging an axe, you were either smart enough to get behind him and see how it's done, or smart enough to get out of his way. Merci beaucoup, mes amis, mes familles. Vive le Québec, vive la Saskatchewan, and vive la Elkridge.
Wow. So before I play this last song, I just wanted to say that condolences to the family, number one, first and foremost, and I was so honored to be invited to perform today in memory of Arne. I only knew Arne for a short time. When Brad Wall was still the premier, he formed this thing called Saskatchewan Enterprise, and they selected the best of the best in these areas, and not that they picked me because the best had nothing to do with it. I got lucky. So the thing is Arne was on the board. And I remember coming to meetings, and anytime we would meet and we would talk, if Arne was asked to do something, it wasn't done the next day. It was done after the meeting. That's how fast. And if anything I've learned from him from that time, short time, is probably about a month and a half that we were together on this board, is, man, if you're going to do something and put your name out there and do it, get off your butt and do it fast. So the family had called me and said that Arne's, one of his favorite tunes is one I'm going to play for you right now, and it's called Alabama Jubilee. Rest in peace, Arne.